I'm going to go back a ways to set the groundwork for this story. I was pretty much raised by my grandma. My mom and dad were never really great at the whole parent thing, and while they floated in and out of my life, Gran was the one who gave me stability. She couldn't afford much. Her little house sat in the kind of neighborhood where people kept their doors locked at all times, compared to a lot of the stories that you hear here. But what she lacked in money, she made up for with love and consistency. She was the one who packed my lunches, walked me to school, and sat up late helping me with homework that I didn't understand. By the time I finished my education and was ready to step into my own life, my grandma's health began to decline. She started showing signs of Alzheimer's, and it hit me like a punch to the chest. This is the woman who remembered every little thing about me. Favorite snacks, bedtime routines, the names of all my childhood friends. But she was starting to forget the simplest of details. Some people tried to convince me that a nursing home was the only realistic option for her, but I just couldn't do it. She'd been there for me through my entire life, and I refused to abandon her in her time of need. So I packed up my life and moved back in with her, determined to care for her the way that she had cared for me. It wasn't always an easy thing. I worked full-time, which meant I had to leave her during the day, but I made it a point to come home on lunch breaks just to check in. The woman next door, a kind lady named Mrs. White, agreed to pop in occasionally as well. Gran's biggest struggle was remembering the basics, like if she had eaten or not, when to take her medicine, even when to drink water. Without reminders, she'd go half the day with nothing. But she was still the sweetest person you'd ever meet, always smiling, always humming these little tunes that she must have picked up decades ago. So one day, I came home on my lunch break like usual, expecting to find her sitting at the kitchen table with her crossword puzzle or maybe dozing off in front of the TV. Instead, when I opened the door, I heard her voice drifting from out of the kitchen. She was talking to someone. At first, I assumed Mrs. White had come by, but something about the tone just made my stomach tie up. Gran sounded nervous, almost apologetic, as if she were trying to soothe someone. I walked quietly toward the kitchen, and the first thing I saw when I stepped inside was a man bent over my grandmother's purse. He was rifling through it like he had every right in the world to be there. My gran, ever cheerful, was standing nearby, wringing her hands together. "Can't you find it, dear?" she asked this man in the sweetest tone imaginable. The man turned his head toward me once he heard my footsteps. His eyes were wide, jittery, and they did something to me that made me want to take a step back. But after that immediate urge settled, I said, "Who the hell are you?" trying my best to sound intimidating. Now that wasn't easy. I'm a petite woman, not exactly the picture of menace, and this guy looked like he could snap me in half if he wanted to. Still though, I didn't want to let him see my fear. Before he could answer, my grandma piped up with a smile. "This is your cousin Danny, dear. He came for the money, you see?" That's when the blood drained from my face. Cousin Danny? I don't have one of those. I don't have any cousins at all. "Gran," I said, my eyes never leaving this man's, "we don't know this man." She giggled like I'd made some sort of silly mistake. "Of course you do, darling. He came for the money. He's going to be buying us a new camper." She launched into one of her stories about the time she and I went on a camping trip when I was 6, about how magical it had been, how I'd begged for s'mores every night we were out there. I could see her eyes sparkling with this memory, all while this stranger stood inches from her, practically salivating over her purse. I did my best to study him. There's no telling where this could go. He was lean, wiry, and he didn't appear to have a weapon. Maybe he was high, certainly desperate. Either way, I knew if he decided to get violent, things could go bad very quickly. That's when I said, with a voice low and steady, "Get out, right now." He stared at me, looking like he was sizing me up, probably calculating his chances to snap my neck. "Follow me out of here," I added, shifting my tone just a little bit. "I'll give you all the cash I've got on me, but you're walking out of here right now." To my shock, the dude seemed to hesitate, but then he nodded. Without another word, he shuffled past me out through the front door. I kept my distance, but followed close enough to make sure that he wasn't going to double back. And the second he stepped over the threshold, I slammed the door shut, locked it, and leaned against it, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. Dude didn't turn back though. He didn't bang against the door or try to kick it down. I think he just left. Whether it was I caught him in the act or now he was outside and visible to the public, I don't know, but something had changed because he just dipped out. When I got back to the kitchen, my grandma was sitting at the table smiling to herself. "Remember Disney World?" she asked, drifting seamlessly into another one of her stories, like there wasn't just some stranger in her house trying to rob her. My stomach turned to lead when I went to check her things. Her purse was empty of the small pill organizer she kept. All of her medication for the week gone. In the bathroom, the little hook where she always hung up her wedding ring was bare. That ring had survived decades, and now it was just gone in the wind. I didn't need to imagine what might have happened if I hadn't come home when I did. He could have taken much more than jewelry and pills. My grandmother, with her failing memory and infinite trust for others, could have been persuaded to leave with him, or something far worse. That was the moment I realized that I couldn't do this alone anymore. I wasn't enough, no matter how much I loved her. If someone could get into the house that easily, trick her without any issue, what was to stop it from happening again? Next time, I might not be there to stop it. So that's what led me to making the hardest decision of my life. I moved her into a nursing home nearby. It literally tore me apart, but I knew it was for her safety. The staff there adored her immediately. Even in her later stages, she had that magnetic sweetness that made people just fall in love with her. I visited often, and she always lit up when she saw me, though sometimes she thought I was her sister, maybe her mother. Sometimes just some kind stranger stopping by. Every now and then, she would bring up Cousin Danny and the camper. She'd smile about it like she was in a dream, retelling the story as though it were some cherished family memory. Each time, I would just kind of play along, nodding and smiling and never correcting her. It was just easier that way. But every time she mentioned him, I felt that same chill sent down my spine. The reality was, we never had a Cousin Danny, and the man she remembered so fondly wasn't a relative. He was a predator who saw an easy target in an old, trusting woman. I try not to dwell on what could have happened that day, but sometimes I just can't help it. At best, he would have gladly drained her of money and possessions, leaving her confused and heartbroken, even if just for a minute. At worst, well, I don't even like to finish that thought. What I do know is this: if I hadn't have walked in when I did, I might have lost more than my grandma's ring and some medicine. I might have lost her entirely, and that thought scares me more than anything else. So this happened at my old job back when I was still pretty green in the whole adulting world. I had two coworkers I got along with well enough, a guy and a woman. The woman was Muslim and wore a hijab. Don't get me wrong, that's not usually important, but it kind of becomes relevant later, so hang in there. We all had to go on this work trip together. It was far from glamorous, just a few days out of town to help with a project. The first day out went fine. We did our jobs, checked into the hotel, and everyone seemed in good spirits. That night, both of them invited me to go out to dinner with them, but I was honestly beat. I figured we'd have plenty of time to socialize later, so I turned them down, went back to my room, and crashed. The next morning, though, I noticed that there was something off with my coworkers. The guy seemed a little quieter than usual. He didn't really want to talk much and kind of kept to himself. When it was time to drive to the site, he pretty much insisted that I ride in the front seat with him, which struck me as odd. I mean, it wasn't exactly a big deal, but his tone made it feel like he really didn't want to be in front with our other coworker. I didn't push it, but it stuck in my mind as weird. Anyway, we got through that day fine, but later that evening, my female coworker invited us both to hang out in our hotel room and have some drinks. Nothing too crazy, just a couple of beers, maybe a movie together. I figured, why not? It was a work trip, and we were all stuck in the same boring town anyway. At first, it was completely normal. We sat around, drank a little bit, and just talked about random stuff. Kids, work, funny stories. I was even starting to think that having a work friend colleague group that was a little bit older than me actually was really cool. They saw life in a different way than I did. They had more experience. It would be cool to kind of pick their brains over things. But right around then is when things started to get strange. Out of nowhere, the lady coworker turned her attention to our male coworker and started hitting on him. I mean, blatantly. Telling him he should take off his shirt, asking him weird personal questions, just crossing lines that felt wildly inappropriate, especially considering he's happily married. The kicker is, so is she. At least that's what I thought coming into this whole thing. I watched the color drain from his face. You could tell he was uncomfortable, but he tried to laugh it off at first. Eventually, it seemed like it got to be too much for him, and he excused himself from the group and said he was heading to bed. Now, before anyone says that I should have spoken up or left too, you have to remember this. This is my very first real job. They're both older than me, and I honestly thought maybe this was just some awkward grown-up flirting dynamic, one that I didn't understand. So instead of bowing out along with him, I stayed behind. And man, I regret that decision even now. When it was just the two of us, she shifted gears almost entirely. Now she was showing me pictures of her kids and talking about her family, which, on its own, normal enough. After what she had just pulled with our coworker, seems a little weird. I was grappling with all of this when she randomly pulls out her phone and heads over to Instagram. She pulls up some page of a male model. I wouldn't say this guy's super famous, just one of those wannabe influencer types with maybe a couple thousand followers. The guy was objectively attractive, but nothing about his page screamed celebrity. That's when she leaned in with these wide, unblinking eyes and told me that she was having an affair with this man, that he was in love with her, and that she was divorcing her husband any day now just so she could run off with this guy. She spoke about it so matter-of-factly, like it was a done deal. And that kind of short-circuited my brain. I didn't know what to say at that point, so I just nodded along, but inside I was screaming, what the hell is happening right now? Things only seemed to get worse the further down this path we went. She navigated away from Instagram. Now she's in her photo roll, and she's scrolling through photos of him. Only these weren't like the ones on his Instagram. These were pictures she had clearly taken without this man knowing. Paparazzi-style shots of him walking down the street, getting into his car, all taken from a great distance away. She had pictures of his workplace, his friends and family. She even had screenshots of conversations he'd had with other people online. And then God knows how she got those. That was the moment that alarm bells really started blaring for me. This wasn't some woman exaggerating a fling to impress me. This lady was showcasing her stalker behavior. Full-on, terrifying, obsessive stalker behavior. I felt a bit ill. My skin actually prickled because I knew deep down that something was really, really wrong. She had this look on her face, like a kind of manic intensity that I don't think I could even properly describe. It was a sort of look where you just know you're not dealing with someone who's all the way there, someone who's not quite stable anymore. And then, as if things weren't already nightmarish, she reached up, untied her hijab, and pulled it off. I can tell you now that I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Her head was covered in bald patches, just random tufts of hair clinging here and there. It was like something you'd see out of a horror movie. The way the dim hotel lighting hit her face while she stared at me with those wild eyes. I know it probably sounds mean to even mention her appearance, but you've got to understand. It wasn't just how she looked. It was the entire combination of everything. The obsessive ranting about some guy who clearly didn't know her. The stalker photos. That intensity in her expression. And then suddenly revealing something so vulnerable in an absolutely creepy context. My stomach was basically on the floor at that point. Every instinct inside of me screamed to get out of that room. I managed to get something out like, I'm getting kind of tired. I think I'll head back to my room. I remember my voice shaking a little bit, but I stood up, moved towards the door like there wasn't any other option. She just looked at me with this flat expression and said, okay. No argument, no attempt to stop me, just that one word in this weirdly monotone voice. I left as calmly as I could, but the second I got out into the hallway, I speed walked all the way back to my room. I locked the door behind me and sat in there trying to unpack what I had just gone through for a good hour. I eventually went to bed, and the next day, she acted like nothing had happened. Completely normal during business hours. Chatting about work, laughing at little things, like the entire previous evening had been a fever dream of mine. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified about that. Later, away from this woman, when I finally worked up the courage, I asked my other coworker why he'd been acting so off the day before. He just gave me this uncomfortable look and said, "She made a move on me." That's all he said. I don't think he had to say more because even in my young brain, it was enough for me to understand exactly what he meant. I still don't know what this woman's deal was, whether it's mental health issues or something else entirely. That night still sticks in my head as one of the strangest nights of my life. I don't know what was going on in that woman's head for most of our trip, or why she chose to involve us in her break from reality. I can say with absolute certainty, though, that the next time a work trip comes up, I won't be spending any of my downtime in our hotel room with her. That was plenty for me. I feel like I've written and rewritten this story a dozen times, and it just never feels good enough. Little disclaimer here. I'm in a really bad depression right now, so trying to function, much less adequately explain one of the most traumatic experiences of my life, in a cohesive and engaging way, feels like attempting to run a marathon through wet cement. I've been exhausting my brain trying to write about this experience. I keep giving up because it's daunting and overwhelming to try and organize all my thoughts into how I'm feeling. I'm a perfectionist. It's a long story, and there were a lot of elements at play that allowed for this to happen. So I usually give up when trying to explain it. My goal is to just get this out there and try to recount my experience as best as I can. I hate writing about this because even though it was 2 years ago, I still really struggle to come to terms with the fallout of what happened, and I don't want people thinking I'm just stupid for doing what I did. This man fooled a lot of people, not just me, but I have to believe I never would have behaved the way I did if I was thinking rationally. I'm hoping this will be cathartic to just let out, so please bear with me. Okay, here goes. This friendship was short-lived, but it all started in October of 2016. I was 24 and living in Mission Valley in San Diego at the time. I love living there because it's pretty central to all the action in San Diego. 15 minutes away from the beach and downtown, but not run down or overcrowded like some parts of SD. The apartment I was living in was in a nicer development, and luxury apartments were being built across the street. Basically, a pretty safe area. This morning, I decided to go for a run to the Fenton Parkway Shopping Center. In it, there's a bunch of restaurants along with a Costco, IKEA, and the Mission Valley Library. This center also has a trolley stop. That's important. My plan that morning was to run to the center and treat myself to Starbucks as a reward for working out. I remember exactly what I was wearing, too. Running shorts and one of those shirt tanks with the sides cut off where you can see the sports bra underneath. Equipped with the pink sports bra, just doing my thing. I get there and I'm finishing up my Starbucks when my dad calls me. I answered the phone and my dad fills me in that my younger brother Daniel is in the hospital. This wasn't shocking news to me. My parents had been debating about whether or not he should go in. I'd said the night before that I thought he should. There's a little crucial backstory to this and why they were telling me at all. Mental illness sucks, and it runs in my family. My mom has suffered from depression since I was born, and my little brother had been showing signs and symptoms of someone who was developing schizophrenia. My whole family was worried about him, and the night before I had talked to my folks and advised them that he should go to an inpatient to at least be safe. I myself had 2 episodes of extremely bad depression in my lifetime at this point, and they fucking sucked. 2015, 2016 had been the worst years of my life, and ultimately culminating in a hospital stay after months of refusing to be helped. This was in July of 2016, and it was a turning point for me. I got on medication, reconnected with family and friends after isolating for a year, and began to rebuild my life. It obviously wasn't that easy, but things totally turned around for the better, and by October of 2016, when the story takes place, I was happier than I'd ever been before. If it sounds like a complete 180, well, that's because it was. Cue a bipolar cycle that I wasn't even aware I was having. More of a side note, and sorry for the extensive backstory, but I'm really just trying to explain and also process this. I've always struggled with social anxiety to a degree. Even without depression, I get anxious and am too hyper-aware of myself when interacting with a group. I'm really friendly, and I think I hide it well, but at the core, I'm pretty introverted and reserved. I'm sure everyone experiences this to some degree themselves, but I remember envying others where total social ease just seemed to come naturally. It never had for me, but in fall of 2016, it was different. Confidence. I suddenly had tons of it. Looking back at things, it was clear I was just hypomanic. But at the time, I had no idea that this is what was happening. I just felt like I was self-actualizing and finally the person I wanted to be. Confident, pretty, smart, generous, kind. I had the words to say and could strike up a conversation with anyone. More than that, though, I wanted to. I felt like I connected with everyone and could be anyone's friend. I was really spiritual at this time, too. I grew up a pastor's kid and have always had faith, but now more than ever, I felt connected to God, and I swear I was seeing signs of his existence everywhere. Also, a common trend in mania that I didn't know about. I learned about this later. Manic thinking leads you to make some extremely poor choices in judgment. A lot of people blow through finances and make reckless decisions when manic. That can at least point you in the direction that this story's headed. While I'm on the phone with my dad, I kind of distractedly started walking around the center. I make my way over to the library parking lot, and there's a few people milling around because it hasn't opened yet. Honestly, I was in my own little world with this conversation and didn't really care if people could overhear me. Normally, I hate talking on the phone in public, but Kelly 2.0 didn't give a shit. I remember praying with my dad for my little brother's health and talking about how life is crazy because I had been in a similar situation just a few months back, of feeling hopelessly suicidal. Totally oversharing in public, but whatever. I got off the call and get a tap on my shoulder. "Excuse me, miss?" I turn around. A short black man in his 60s, wearing a hat that says Navy on it, is standing to my right. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Are you a Christian?" "Why, yes," I said that I was. "I am too. My name's Tony, and I just wanted to say I'm inspired by your faith. I wanted to ask, is it okay if I pray for your brother as well?" I was honestly so touched by the kindness of this random stranger. It was a bold thing to do, but at the time, I just remember being really inspired and moved that he would offer to pray with me. I actually thought he might be a pastor or something, as he had that vibe. People talk about creeps and how they're dirty and classically creepy looking. I honestly didn't get that feeling from this guy, like at all. Also, this was 9 a.m. on a sunny October morning, with tons of other people around. I didn't feel threatened in the least. He wasn't asking for anything, and I was a lot bigger than him. I would guess he's about 5'5", while I'm nearly 6 feet tall. I said sure, and we moved to a bench where he prays a short prayer. Short, but really meaningful. During his prayer at one point, he puts his hand on my knee. I'm uncomfortable with this and was about to shift, but before I'm about to, he removes it. I was too polite to say anything, and he just continued on praying. A lot of people in church will lay hands on each other to pray as a sign of comfort, and so this isn't something setting off huge alarm bells. But I remember how I felt in that second vividly, exposed and uncomfortable. Now I look back on what I was wearing and I feel absolutely sick. It's so painfully obvious why I was approached, but at the time, I was naively trusting in the goodness of strangers. After that, I kind of forget how the conversation went exactly, but we basically launched into a super deep conversation about life. I would normally never be this open with a stranger, but he caught me at the right time, and he was really funny and well-spoken. He tells me that he's a Navy veteran. I revealed that I used to work with vets as a nurse, and we bond over that. He says his wife Gloria was a nurse, but she died back in 2005, and after that, things went downhill for him. I talked about my past year and how hard it had been, and he said he could definitely relate to struggle. He revealed that he was living in a shelter and goes to the library every day because he's studying to go back to school with some military-assisted program, and that he's only survived this long because of his faith. I forget what else we talked about in all honesty, but the conversation lasted for over an hour outside in the sunshine. This guy was incredibly insightful and eloquent. He had some really good insights into the Bible, and it's clear that he knew his stuff. Before I leave, he asked if I wanted to stay in touch, maybe even meet at the library again for a Bible study. I said sure. We exchanged email addresses, and I remember running home thinking how cool it was. Human connection and meeting another strong Christian and all of that. Well, 2 days later, I get an email from Tony. I open it up, and I'm surprised because for how well-spoken he was in person, this dude had the writing of a 10-year-old on AIM. All caps and run-on sentences. I still have all the emails, so here's what he wrote. Hello, didn't have time to write to you, but today I have. We need to see each other and then you can update me on how your brother is doing. I miss you extremely and not ashamed to say it. The Lord has a word for you, and I want to tell you in person. Let's set up a date for this to happen. I will be here at the library tomorrow and we can meet here, okay? Anyway, there is so much going on in your life, but I want you to reflect on this. There is a time and a place for everything under the sun. I, this day, choose the word faith. It's ongoing for you, but your faith is faltering when it comes to your brother. You see him hurting, and you want it to be over quickly. Well, sorry, love. This is going to take time and some sacrifice on your part. Anyway, contact me today if you see this. I will be here until 3 p.m. today. I made a mental note to get back to him, but got distracted and forgot. I ended up getting this the next day. I'm sure you are very, very busy with things on the home front, but at least advise me of what's going on because I do love you as a sister in Christ and want you happy. It's been 2 days now, so I'm starting to worry about you. So please advise. And also I sent you an invite to hang out where we can talk. Talk to me, honey. I emailed him back updating him on my brother and said I would be free to meet up the following week. His response: I'm happy to hear that your brother is doing better. And yes, I can meet you here at the library on Wednesday. It will be great to see you again. I will be here by 8:30. Anyway, my life has been a pure blessing by knowing you and receiving your spiritual love. It only comes from God, as I do know I love you so very much. Hope things are going well for you, and I look forward to our next encounter. I'm homeless, but I have a home in glory, so don't fret about the place and the circumstances I have found myself in. I had a dream about you the other night. I will tell you next time I see you. It was awe-inspiring. Read Matthew 4:19. It'll give you a clue. I've reread his emails cringing at so many red flags. It makes me want to punch myself in the face, actually. I'm an adult woman. I'm not an 8-year-old. This guy is pushy. He would call me honey, boo, love. I know it's obviously weird, but at the time, I truly dismissed it just as the way he would talk, and just a term of endearment in grandpa sort of way. As an older black man, it was sort of what made him funny. I told my cousin Emily about meeting Tony, and that we planned to meet up. She texted me this: Kel, if you do decide to do this, please meet in a public place and please bring Scott. Scott is my older brother who I lived with at the time. He's 2 years older than me, 6'7", and one of my best friends. You have a beautiful heart and don't know how pretty you are. I don't want this guy getting the wrong idea. I definitely remember laughing at the thought of some romantic thing. This dude was literally old enough to be my grandpa and looks like a taller cousin of Gary Coleman. It was comical to me. There's no way I'm interested, and he obviously knows I'm not interested. We were meeting for a Bible study. But then my head returns to that moment at the library and thinks, I should just to be safe. Scott agrees to go with me. I didn't mention it to Tony that he'd be coming because it was kind of a last-minute plan. And honestly, even though I enjoyed the meeting the first time, I also had a life and other things going on in it. So I didn't want to meet for more than an hour because I had shit to do. We get to Safeway next to the library, and Tony's there waiting. I introduce him to my brother, and Tony cracks a few jokes about how he feels so short next to Scott. We all laughed and started talking together. After about 5 minutes, Tony makes this comment: Well, it's nice to meet you, Scott. I hope to see you again soon. As in, basically dismissing him. Scott and I exchange glances, and Scott replies that he drove me here, so he's going to join in. Tony doesn't skip a beat and says the more the merrier. I remember feeling relieved. We ended up talking for about an hour, and it truly is another great conversation. We had our Bible study, and it was really engaging. Scott and I bought him a sandwich, and we had lunch together. After we left the meetup, I asked Scott what he thought. Scott thought he was really nice too. Cool guy. We both acknowledged the fact that Tony obviously thought he was meeting with just me, and how Scott felt like he was expected to leave at first. But we chalked it up to Tony just not expecting Scott to stay for the Bible study. Thank you for a wonderful morning, and again for the nourishment. It'll be great. I had a great time chatting with your brother. He seems like a good man. Any woman who finds him will be more than lucky. Next we meet, just let me know. I will continue praying for your loved one. It'll be fine, I guarantee it. I promise. I love you so much for being the friend I now have. I will be there for you no matter what. Love, your BFF Tony. Reading these emails now makes me shudder, but I honestly just chalked it up to him being lonely and genuinely looking for a friend. We continued to email back and forth. For every one email I would send, Tony would send back 3 or 4. At one point he sends me this: send me a pic of you so I can look at it when I need that extra smile. And I did. I felt straight weird sending it, but I swear to God, I opened up my photo booth and took a picture of me making a funny face and waving at the camera. I didn't tell anyone he asked for a picture because I knew it sounded textbook creepy, but I rationalized it in my head that he was old and lonely. He told me he loved me like he would love a daughter. I think we met up 4 more times. Tony lived out in Santee, but would take the trolley to Mission Valley. We met up once more at Starbucks, but Scott didn't make it for that. I didn't really have any qualms about it at this point. I didn't ask why he was homeless or how he got there, and he never volunteered the information. To this day, I wonder if I had asked, what he would have said. It felt rude of me to pry, and I figured in due time he would just naturally open up about it. The second time, I invited him to attend church with Scott and I. The church we went to is made up of mostly young adults. This Sunday night, after the service, the church was hosting a barbecue/fellowship night. Tony definitely stood out, but he held his own, and during the event, I saw him talking to a couple of the guys from church. I was glad. I wanted him to meet other Christian men and make more friendships because honestly, it was starting to get kind of suffocating. Tony kept saying that Scott and I were his only friends, but he only ever communicated with me. On the drive home, I specifically remember him telling me that he introduced himself to Pastor Wes, our pastor, and he relayed the conversation they had. Remember all of this because I swear it's important. November rolls around, and after our last meeting, Tony mentioned his birthday was coming up. I talked to Scott, and because I wanted Tony to feel like he had some sort of family on his birthday, he told me he had no one. We agreed to invite him over for dinner. A super obvious PSA that probably no one needs to hear, but I needed to. Do not invite a homeless stranger into your home, no matter how nice they may seem. Dear God, I was genuinely trying to make the guy feel welcomed and loved, and it was because of the stigma of homelessness that I wanted to do the opposite and show him that I wasn't afraid to let him see where I lived. Homelessness itself is dehumanizing, and I wanted him to feel like a person on his birthday. Scott was way more hesitant about letting him come over. I advocated for Tony, and eventually Scott agreed. I told him to bring his laundry and I would wash it for him, and we let him wash up beforehand in my bathroom. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I also invited my best friend Grace and her boyfriend Robert. I did the cooking. I had asked him what his favorite meal was. Steak with tons of caramelized onions and butter, salad with Russian dressing, mashed potatoes, and a Dutch apple pie. I went to Ralph's and blew $80 on the ingredients to make it. Tony was super grateful and said it was the best meal he'd had since his wife passed away. I mentioned that I had a psychiatrist appointment the next day. Tony at this time had gotten one of those Obama phones and would call every once in a while. I was honestly kind of wary about it because he now had another way to stay in touch with me, and it was draining trying to keep up with him. I have 2 voicemails of his saved. I want you to take a listen. This guy is textbook manipulative. Note the changes in his voice between the 2. He sounds like a completely different person in the second one. This first message was right after his birthday dinner.
Hey, I just want to again thank you for being a gracious host this morning, and I appreciate all that you're doing for me. And I'm praying that if you're at the doctor, that everything is okay with you physically as well as mentally. But anyway, I want to thank you for being a gracious host to me, and I am in love with an angel. Yes, I am, and you know it.
The second one, I was running late meeting him, and he was not happy about it.
Hey, Kelly, this is Antonio. Listen, I'm over here at the Starbucks. So if you're going to drive up over here, you got up to fine. I've got everything set up, and I'm going to have to move this suitcase. It's really crummy. I really don't want to have to do that. So just know that I'm here at Starbucks, and you'll see me as soon as you come into the door. I'll be waiting for you. Okay? Call me back or text me. Let me know whether or not you received this message. I'll see you when you get here. I love you so very much, my brother. So very much. Bye for now.
Sunday rolls around, and Tony joins Scott and I for church again. Afterwards, a big group of us decides to go to this Mediterranean place. Everyone orders, and by the time we get seated, it's me, Scott, Tony, our friend Brandon, and my friend Julia at one end of the table. Tony and Brandon get to talking. I wasn't really paying that much attention because I was chatting it up with Julia. I had paid for Tony's meal, and he originally tried to order some catfish dish. It was actually one of the most expensive items on the menu. Also, sounded disgusting to me, but I was happy to do it. The restaurant was out of it. I remember this distinctly. When the waitress came back to the table to tell Tony that they were out, he made a huge deal about it. Just kind of abrasive, sighing like he was personally offended, and was sort of demeaning to the waitress when she offered up other options. I remember feeling both apologetic toward the waitress and honestly kind of intimidated by Tony. Once he got the replacement dish, he was back to joking around and being friendly. I chalked it up to him being just tired and hungry. After dinner, I offered to drive Tony home, and I did so, alone. When he wasn't at the shelter, he said he lived on a bench way out in Santee. I remember this night it had kind of started to rain. I felt really bad for Tony, and he had a way of making you feel bad for him too, for being homeless, both in his emails and in person. Driving out to the bench in the cold, I felt both a nagging obligation to offer him a dry place to sleep and the disconcerting feeling like he was expecting me to offer. I actually had previously considered it, but both Scott and I discussed it, and we didn't want to invite him over to spend the night even once, for fear of setting up a pattern or expectation in the future. I'm nearing the bench, and he makes it clear he's unhappy and tired of being homeless. "I'm so sick of this. You're the only good thing in my life, Kelly." We chat for a bit, and I try to encourage him, and we make plans for me to pick him up for church the next week. Right before he exits the car, he leans over and gives me a quick kiss goodbye. On the lips. Nope, not okay. I'm definitely uncomfortable with that. I felt immediately weird and violated. I kind of stammer out a goodbye and pull out of the parking lot, leaving Tony just standing there, watching me as I go. Driving home, I felt gross. I'm also now uncomfortable as it dawns on me that I just drove a man 40 years older than me, that I really barely even know, to an area with no one else around at night. These are huge no-nos that, up until this point, I was oblivious to, because hypomanic me just thought I was making a positive impact in Grandpa Tony's life. I get home and was probably there about 30 minutes when Scott gets a text from Brandon. I hadn't told Scott about the kiss at this point. I asked Scott what he and Brandon were talking about, and that's when he shared the text with me. Basically, Brandon had asked what the vibe was that Scott got from Tony. Scott said he thought he was all right, but Brandon wasn't of the same belief. He said that he thinks Tony is a pathological liar, due to making some pretty serious claims about being in the Navy for 8 years, yet reaching a rank that some people work their entire lives to get. There were other holes in Tony's story according to Brandon, but this was the first one to stick out. I have this gut feeling, a sinking one. Scott and I talk about it. Maybe Tony's just overcompensating for the fact that he's homeless. He goes by Tony, but I knew his full name from his email address. I hadn't bothered to look him up before. He told me he had no social media accounts and didn't know the first thing about setting one up. I remember teasing him that he should join the 21st century. I never searched him up because there was no reason to. I type his name into Google and the first thing that pops up makes me want to hurl. It's a mugshot for Megan's Law. And the Tony in the picture is terrifying. This man is a violent registered sex offender. I instantly feel sick to my stomach and terrified. I had been with this guy less than an hour ago, alone, way out in the middle of nowhere Santee. The next result after his mugshot was his Facebook profile, the one he said he never had. I can't stop myself from clicking on it. I wanted to know everything about this guy. All he has is a single profile picture and 1,500 friends. All women, all young women, my age. I then head over to Instagram and search his name. Sure enough, he's there as well. The only people he follows are Instagram models in lingerie, women with bare asses and huge tits, along with BDSM stuff. He has 20 followers and every single one is a sex-related chat for money type account. I call my cousin and aunt, who advised me to report this guy to the police. He hasn't done anything against the law though, really, and I feel both gross and conflicted with what to do. He's preying upon young women, and I was stupid enough to fall for it. I called up Pastor Wes because I knew he had spoken with Tony and Scott, and I was kind of at odds with what to do. I explained the situation since Wes is at least familiar with Tony. Oh, that guy that you bring every few weeks? Yeah, I vaguely remember him. Wes meets a lot of people every Sunday, so I assumed he just forgot. I remind him about the conversation he had with Tony. Kelly, I've never spoken to him or even had an interaction with that guy. The only reason I know who he is and remember him is because he was really rude to Monica at the barbecue, because she wouldn't let him in the kitchen. Monica is Wes's wife. Huh. Now, I remember Tony had told me explicitly that they had talked. He had even given a word-for-word relay of their conversation. But apparently, that never happened. Instantly, everything has a new meaning and an extra sinister twist to it. I feel both incredibly violated and just so mindful that someone could lie that effortlessly straight to my face without missing a beat. I didn't even ask him about Wes. Tony was the one who brought him up. I thought about all the other conversations we'd had, and now I know this guy was just saying whatever he felt like in order to gain my trust, which he had done. I'd let this guy into my home, let him shower in my shower, shown him pictures of my family. Long story not short, after discovering this and talking to my friends and family, I reported Tony to the police and sent him an email explaining that I didn't want any contact with him anymore. I still had some of his laundry at my house, and I didn't want to give him any excuse to come by and get it. In the email, I told him his clothes were clean and he could pick them up at the church, but not to contact me anymore. I was hoping that would be the end of it. I blocked his number, but I hadn't on Gmail. Email after email. He sent me dozens of them, pleading to talk so he could explain himself. I didn't take the bait though. My friend who actually works for Gavin DeBecker, he wrote the book The Gift of Fear, and it's all about predators who use manipulation to take advantage of you. Advised me this: never respond to a stalker. Even if you ignore 500 messages and respond to only one, all that has taught the stalker is that he needs to keep bothering you until he gets a response. The emails started off kindly enough, then turned accusatory. He actually threatened to unalive himself in one. I let the police know because these emails were coming in non-stop. Then I blocked him. For the next few days, I was terrified to be in my apartment alone. I didn't go anywhere by myself. I bought a mace and a taser online, and anytime I needed to drive somewhere or return home, I would call Scott or a friend so they could walk me to and from my car if I was by the apartment. Thankfully, Thanksgiving break was the next week, so I had a reprieve from the paranoia when Scott and I were home visiting family. Once we returned to San Diego, a few days passed, and by this point, it had been 2 weeks since I blocked Tony. No word or sight from him during this time, and although I was extremely anxious to be home alone by myself, With each passing day, I grew a little bit more relieved. If he hadn't come by up to this point, he probably got the message to leave me alone. It was December 4th. Scott had made previous plans to visit LA the upcoming weekend to visit friends, and I had obligations in San Diego, so I felt okay to stay here by myself while he went out of town. The night before, Grace and Robert were hosting a party to celebrate Robert's graduation from EMT school. Knowing we'd be drinking and having a good time, my friend Michaela planned to spend the night and we would Uber over there together. The night was a blast, and we got home at 2 a.m, buzzed and happy. The next morning, I made her breakfast and she left shortly after. It was no later than 10 a.m. 10 minutes after Michaela left, I get a knock at the door. I'm praying it's Michaela, realizing that she forgot something, but I had this huge knot in my stomach as I approached the peephole. I look out and scream internally when I see that it's Tony. Thank God the door was locked, because even though I didn't answer or say a word, Tony knew I was home. My car was in the driveway. He didn't say anything. He just pounded on the door, relentlessly. There's a window if you walk around the door where you can see into the apartment, and even though it was closed, I was freaked out that he would walk around and see me. I ran into Scott's bathroom, which is the farthest thing away from the door. I had a kitchen knife with me, my mace, my taser, and I called 911. I could still hear him pounding on the door. I frantically explained to the 911 operator the situation, and they said that they would send someone over. I hang up and FaceTime Grace and Robert to let them know what's going on, and they get into their car and head to my apartment. While this is all happening, the knocking eventually stops, and I'm praying that he's given up and left. But that's when I hear a crash on the balcony. I can't see out there, and there's no way in hell that I'm leaving the bathroom. But I'm positive that this climbed over the railing and was now trying to get in through the sliding glass door. Fucking A, was the balcony door locked? I was 99% sure it was, because I'd been vigilant and paranoid about locking all the doors. But having come home buzzed the night before, I couldn't remember if I had double-checked it before bed. That 1% of uncertainty was absolutely terrifying. I called 911 again in a panic, explaining that this man is now trying to break in. The dispatcher asks if he has weapons, and I honestly don't know what to say. The guy is dangerous, he's cunning, and he had told me himself that he carries a switchblade on the street for protection. Out of all the lies he told me, I do believe that he was in the military, and probably had some combat training at least. The dispatcher tells me to stay on the line until the police arrive. I can't hear anything, and I don't know if that's because he's given up or if it's because he opened the door and is now inside my house. In that moment, I honestly thought I was going to die. I thought Tony was going to break in, assault me, and eventually kill me. My mind just broke in fear. I remember frantically praying over and over again 1,000,000 times. That's when I hear a loud pounding on the front door once more. Only this time, it's accompanied by loud yells of police. I was so terrified that it could be Tony pretending to be a police officer, but the 911 dispatcher assured me that it was indeed the police at my door. I open up the door in a frenzy. 4 cops are standing there. 2 are next to my door, and the other 2 are a little off to the side with Tony. I had an actual breakdown seeing him. I just started sobbing. I was freaking out and inconsolable. The cops took him away, and the main officer was extremely kind and comforting. He gave me instructions on how to file a restraining order. Having that experience becoming so paranoid about Tony triggered full-blown mania in me. I couldn't sleep at all for 2 nights straight after this happened, and posted on social media constantly, messaging everyone. I started believing I'd survived death and come out with all these mind-blowing observations on the other side. So, yeah. Looking back on it, it's embarrassing, the stuff that I put out on Facebook. But that's its own story. My family had already been concerned, and this was the tipping point. I got admitted to the hospital and ended up staying there for 2 weeks, having become full-blown psychotic at that point. Once I was more stabilized, the hospital issued me a day pass so I could get my restraining order from the court downtown. I had to face Tony in court to do this, and it was awful. I was praying that he wouldn't show, but he did. Brandon and Scott testified, And then it was Tony's turn to speak. This guy straight out lied to the judge's face that this was a mutual relationship, that I was the one in love with him, and that I had changed my mind, and the only reason he went by my house that day was to pick up his laundry. I didn't even have his fucking laundry, and he knew it. Watching this guy lie and turn on the charm was disgusting, and I was sitting in the chair trembling while he did it. My turn to speak. I presented the judge with printouts of every single email he ever sent me, his Facebook account and Instagram accounts with all the young women. Tony was shocked that I had evidence, but no duh. She threw the book at him. It felt like something from Law & Order, I swear. Gave him this whole speech to never take advantage of a young woman again, or he would have to answer to her. In that moment, it felt like sweet, sweet justice. He wasn't allowed to be within 100 yards of me and was ordered to stay away from the Fenton Parkway Center. I never saw Tony again, and I've moved since. The paranoia after lasted for a long, long time. From this experience, I now know that the mood swings I'd been having years past was manic depression, and that I have BPD. Shit sucks, and right now, I'm back in a fucking sinkhole of depression. But yeah, fun times. I apologize for such a long post. I can imagine that's not everybody's cup of tea. But for those of you who stuck around till the bitter end, I want to say thank you for giving me your time and a platform to get all of this out there. I don't know what percentage of healing involves getting all of your internal thoughts out there in some way, but after sharing this, I feel about 50 pounds lighter. Thank you again.